last week you introduced us to a charming young boy, an Eagle Scout, Richard Cypert, who was facing an operation to help combat his cerebral palsy.
Yeah, the cerebral palsy patient, and so far, so good is what we can tell. Last Tuesday, Richard Cypert was wheeled into an operating room at Santa Rosa Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas, for an operation which, if successful, will allow him to walk normally and therefore run and play like any other active teenager. What a team of doctors did was try to relieve Richard's spasticity. His leg muscles were permanently contracted stiff. It's caused by incorrect signals from the brain to the leg muscles. During the operation, doctors separated out the nerves carrying signals to Richard's leg. They tested each minute fiber and actually cut the ones carrying the incorrect signals. It took 6 painstaking hours, and after it was over, the chief surgeon had comforting words for Richard's anxious parents.
He had no problems, tolerated everything nicely.
Kathleen, doctors think things went well, but it'll be at least a week, maybe even 2 before they'll know for sure.
George, thank you very much. The patient Richard Cypert, a brave young man who had experimental surgery last month. This week, doctors started to see some improvement since the operation. George Strait is the one who first brought us Richard's story.
Kathleen, isn't it nice to be able to report good news for a change? The operation is designed to correct one of the major manifestations of cerebral palsy, spasticity. Cypert, like millions of other cerebral palsy patients, has stiff muscles, or he had them, and it affected his coordination. It made walking especially difficult. Richard walked on his toes. He couldn't put his whole foot on the ground in the normal heel-toe walking motion. The aim of the operation is to correct that problem so Richard can walk, run, and play like his friends who don't have cerebral palsy. It's tough work because, like a baby, Richard has to learn how to walk again, starting from the beginning.
And now he's at the point where he can crawl fairly well normally, but he's not at the point yet where he can really walk. He is standing up with help and learning to feel his muscles.
Some points I get discouraged, and then other points I'm up real high and ready to go, but I mean, it's not going to get me down.
A month ago, doctors operated on Richard's spine, cutting nerves causing the spasticity. Now Richard has to learn how to use muscles he's never had control over, muscles weak from non-use, yet muscles he must use if he's ever to walk normally.
Before I couldn't move my hip individually, and they're trying to teach me to do that and learn how to walk in the right way, like, you know, you're supposed to. Right now I can feel the separate muscle groups in my legs. Golly, that's what I used to look like. Just the tightness is all I could feel. And now everything's so loose that I could feel everything. Okay. The doctors and therapists are real pleased, and they say I'm progressing great, and I just hope I keep it up.
6 months down the road, I hope he'll be walking. And I hope a year down the road, he'll have a fairly normal gait.
Last Thursday, Richard was released from the hospital. Like most teenagers, he's impatient. He wants to hurry up and get well. But his doctors warn that impatience could be dangerous.
You're going to take it slow.
Bit.
Okay?
I'm going to mess up.
I'm real serious with this. You have to go slow and have patience.
We knew he would get better, and he has. We knew it would be a slow process, and it's going to be, but it's going to turn out fine. There's no doubt in my mind.
There's no doubt in anybody else's mind either, Kathleen, and it's that kind of determination that'll see Richard and his whole family through this ordeal.
George, how long until we really know how successful that operation was?
Well, doctors think in about 6 months they'll know whether or not Richard will be able to walk normally. In about a year, they should really know. And within 5 years, Richard says he wants to run a marathon.
Unbelievable. Thank you, George. And in a moment, staying out of trouble on the camping trail.
Patients with an awkward walk, stiff muscles, and even slurred speech. Doctors, though, have been experimenting in the last few years with a new surgical treatment for spasticity. We've been following one patient in particular for some time now. Here's George Strait. George?
Karen, his name is Richard Cypert, and he's from West Texas. 19 years ago, Richard was born with cerebral palsy. It primarily affects his gait. He walks on his toes, and his arms were also affected. They flailed about without much coordination with his feet. But we can now report some good news, because there's been a big change. When we met Richard 2 years ago, he was already a remarkable young man. Despite the cerebral palsy that held his muscles in lockstep, He was an active participant in life, instead of merely an observer, even riding his bike over 200 miles to this Boy Scout camp. But Richard and his parents wanted more for him, a chance at being normal. Then his mother heard about a new operation that might help.
They told me I'll be able to put my heels on the ground just like anyone else. I'll have better control over my legs. No spasticity, better balance. That's everything I want.
Richard underwent surgery to relieve the spasticity in his muscles. The procedure, called rhizotomy, involves cutting the sensory nerve roots that cause the muscles to contract involuntarily. After the operation, the newly released muscles were weak, and the challenge for Richard was to learn how to walk all over again.
And now he's at the point where he can crawl fairly well normally, but he's not at the point yet where he can really walk. He is standing up with help and learning to feel his muscles.
The doctors and therapists are real pleased, and they say I'm progressing great, and I just hope I keep it up.
18 months after leaving Santa Rosa Hospital, Richard Cypert is indeed keeping it up. He spent 3 months in a wheelchair, another 6 with crutches, but today he's walking on his own, his feet flat on the ground.
He can isolate individual muscles and has more control over them. He still is not as strong as I would like. He still needs to build up the strength in his legs and work on his posture.
If I walk a normal speed, I can walk just pretty well, pretty good, but if I speed up or, try to walk real fast, it kind of gets a little sloppy.
Now a freshman at Howard College in West Texas, Richard goes once a week after school to physical therapy to work on building up weak muscles and breaking down old habits.
When he's tired, if he's preoccupied, he goes back to those old patterns sometimes. If he's thinking about it, if he's paying attention, he can stand up straight and walk straight.
It's very difficult to change a habit that you've done for 19 years. You have to think about it all the time, and it's just, especially a body posture, it's very difficult to change.
Because the learned postures in older children are so difficult to change, Dr. Marlin says he now concentrates on rhizotomy candidates much younger than Richard. One's only 3 or 4 years old.
I think that if another one came along like him, they would sit down with Richard's family and have a long talk. The posture aspects of this were not as important in my mind initially as they are now.
Richard has no doubts about what decision he would make.
I'd go through every bit of it all over again 3 times because, it's so much better now. And now I have my whole life ahead of me and just be just like anyone else, I presume.
As good as Richard seems, Karen, we have to emphasize that he still has a long way to go. And also, this operation really does work best with younger children, not kids as old as Richard.
Will it provide help, though, for all people with cerebral palsy?
Not all people. Basically, it'll help those who have trouble walking.
Is this done everywhere?
Not everywhere. The basic places where they are being done and the places that have had the most success are in Los Angeles, Chicago, and San Antonio.
All right, George. Thanks.
Sure.
Coming up next, growth hormones. Would they help a normal short child?